Hello, YouTube. It's Barbara Jean. Okay. um, I want to talk to you about. There it is. I want to talk to you about something that the Lord was. I discovered something, and I'm thinking to myself, why didn't I see this before? A very, very. I remember I've been telling you for some time now that the rapture of the church occurs in the sixth seal, and guess what it does? I know this for a certain fact. That is where the rapture of the church occurs in the sixth seal of the book of Revelation in chapter 6. That is where the rapture occurs of the church. And I can prove it now. I mean, I could prove it before, but I can really prove it now. And it's like, I'm thinking to myself, why didn't I see this? Excuse me. Just drank some tea. I never saw it before. um, so clearly I'm thinking, why didn't I see this? Why didn't I see this earlier? This is so in your face, evident that that's where the rapture of the church occurs in the book of Revelation. Now, the reason why I was thinking about it was because of this verse in Matthew 24 that has been disturbing me. Because when I hear it, I think, what does that mean? It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. I don't even know what that means. But anyway, let me just go to it here. Matthew 24. Jesus is talking to the disciples, and he's telling them um, that the temple is going to be destroyed. Now, this disturbs the disciples, and they're wondering, what? So they come to him privately on the Mount of Olives, and the disciples came unto him, saying privately, this is verse 3 of Matthew 24, and he says, he sat upon the Mount of Olives. The disciples came unto him privately, saying, tell us when these things shall be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world. Actually, that's three questions, actually. They probably not realizing that, but that's three questions they just asked him. The destruction of the temple, the sign of thy coming, and the end of the world. Jesus answers the first two. He tells them about the sign of his coming, which is it tells them about the temple, and tells them its destruction and how, to look out for these particular signs. But he also tells them the sign of his coming, and which is the rapture of the church. Okay, and in fact, there's no doubt anybody who's read the entirety of chapter 24 of Matthew that he is referring to the rapture of the church, because it talks about how one will be taken, one will be left, two will be in the mill, grinding at the mill, one will be taken, one will be left. Watch therefore, make sure you're ready. Two will be in the field, one will be taken, one will be left. Two will be sleeping, one will be taken, one will be left. So this is no doubt is talking about the rapture of church for the most part of this chapter. However, the verse that was disturbing me was this. So he's telling them about basically the tribulation of a certain period. So first he starts with the temple, and the temple is going to be thrown down, and that happened in AD 70. Okay, so that was the beginning of this tribulation that the world is going through and has been going through for the past 2,000 years. Nobody can deny the fact that everything that he has talked about here in Matthew 24 has already occurred and is occurring even now. Only it's ramping up, if you will. Many will say that they will be deceived. There's false Christs, wars and rumors of wars, nation rising against nation, kingdom against kingdom, famine, pestilence, earthquake, diverse places, the saints being killed. This has been going on steadily and increasingly for the past 2,000 years. Okay, and nobody can deny that. I mean, look at the great past, the great. There's been many famines. For instance, like the Irish famine, or the potato famine in Ireland. Millions starved. Talk about the pestilence. Look at the Black Plague that took millions of lives in Europe during a certain period of time. and not other people, people and places and worlds, countries and nations have all gone through great tribulation in the last 2,000 years. So this whole first part of his dissertation in chapter 24 is talking about the tribulation of those days, of these days that we're in right at the moment, the tribulation of these days. And he even says so here in, let's see, if go down to verse 29, it says, immediately after the tribulation of those days. So, and then he goes on and talks about his return. This verse 29, we see actually verse 27, it says, for the lightning cometh out of the east and shineth even unto the west, so shall the coming also be the coming of the Son of Man. For wherever the carcass is, there will the art. Boy, I'm just so tongue-tied right now. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagle be gathered together, immediately after the tribulation of those days. So he's talking about a period of time, and where all these things will be signs and tribulation for the earth. And it has happened. If you look at the wars that have happened for the past 2,000 years, millions and millions of lives lost in wars and tribulations. And they talk about Africa going through tribulation. Europe and Asia and every nation of the world has gone through tribulation in one form or another. And not just once, but many times. The world has been in tribulation, people. But he says something here that I think this is the sign that he's talking about. The sign of the coming of the man is right here. Lightning coming from the east, shining to the west. So shall the coming of the Son of Man be. I believe that's the sign that we're supposed to be looking for. First of all, lightning coming up from the east and shining even unto the west. That will be the great sign of his coming. Okay? And all the world will be able to see it. But he says something interesting. This is the verse that was disturbing me. Verse 28, for wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. Now, what does that mean? I'm thinking to myself, Lord, that really disturbs me. What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? I still don't fully understand it. However, I was thinking how when I was looking up on Wikipedia about the Eagle Standard, it began with the Romans. They would carry their Eagle Standard. They have a symbol. I think it was a circle or an orb or something with an eagle standing on it. Now, could be wrong. I could be wrong, but I do know that they had an Eagle Standard, and then when the armies of Rome would march, they'd carry this Eagle Standard in front of them. Okay, and many nations in Europe and also the Arab nations have a standard of an eagle. Also, of course, the United States has an eagle standard, but also Nazi Germany, the Holy Roman Empire, which was an Austrian-German empire that reigned for many, many years. Their standard was an eagle. Also Napoleon had an eagle standard. In fact, he carried it into battle, and made a great show of it too. Apparently, this eagle standard was carried in front of the armies, and if anybody would lose their eagle, there was great dishonor for their regiment if they lost their eagle standard. Also, Nazis, the swastika, their formal emblem was a swastika with an eagle on it. So perhaps I believe that this is what the Lord is referring to when he's talking about where the eagles, or where the carcasses of the eagles have gathered. They're coming in for a prey. They're coming in to take. They're coming to steal, destroy. So look for the eagle standard. The eagle apparently means Zeus or Jupiter or something. Anyway, those who can study this a lot further, better at this kind of investigation, probably get more out of it than I would. However, I just was thinking maybe that is what the Lord is referring to when he's talking about the eagle, where the eagles gather, or the carcasses are where the eagles gather. That those who have this eagle standard are the ones that are maybe the instigators of the wars that are happening in destruction and death and destruction in the world. Could be. I'm not saying anything bad against the American people themselves, because I'm sure they're not that way, but their government, certainly as we know, is very corrupt. It has been corrupt for some time. And that's not just them, but every government is pretty much corrupt. That's beside the point. Okay, anyway, I was just thinking about that. No, please don't take offense. I'm not bashing the American people. My dad's American. What can I say? Okay. But anyway, that's what was coming to my mind in regards to where the carcasses, the eagles will gather. That's the only thing that makes a lot of sense to me, or any sense to me, in regards to this verse. So anyway, while I was looking at this verse and looking at some things, all of a sudden I went to myself, said to myself, hold on. This corresponds perfectly with Revelation chapter 6. When Christ begins opening the seals, wars, destruction. Let me just go back to Revelation chapter 6. And he opens the seals. He opens the first one. The white horse and him that sat on him had a bow, and a crown given unto him, went forth conquering and to conquer. That, I believe, is Antichrist spirit. The Antichrist spirit was released. The second seal was opened, and there was a red horse who was given power to take peace from the earth, killing one another. This is the tribulation. This is the tribulation. The opening of the seals began the tribulation of those days that Christ was talking about in Matthew 24. The tribulation of those days, or the tribulation of these days. We're still in those days because we haven't yet had the sixth seal hasn't yet been opened. And I can prove that it hasn't been opened, and I can prove that that's the rapture of the church, because the seals have been opened, and all these things have happened and have been happening on this earth during the tribulation of these days. Okay. So anyway, when you get to chapter, or still in the same chapter, but you get to the sixth seal. And he says, and I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became as black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casts her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind, and the heavens departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island was moved out of their place, and the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and mighty men, and every bondsman, and every free man, hid themselves in the dens and rocks in the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? So when you go back to Matthew 24 and you do a comparison study, it says in verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days. Okay, so we're in those days. These are the days of those. We're still in those days. But he said immediately, right away, after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall the tribes of the earth mourn and see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So what is the sign that he's referring to? He's referring to the sign that he says in verse 27, lightning. There shall be lightning as the sign. There shall be a sign of his coming, and it's lightning coming out of the east and shining even unto the west. Okay? And it comes immediately after the tribulation of those or these days. And he gives us more indications as to when the rapture happens, because he says the sun shall be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and powers of heaven shall be shaken. And then shall the appearance of the Son of Man, shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall the tribes of the earth mourn. Now we look back over here in Revelation chapter 6. We open the sixth seal. There's a great earthquake. The sun becomes black as sackcloth. Immediately, that works perfectly. It says the sun shall be darkened. The moon shall become as blood. So the moon will not give its light. It will become as blood. That's the same as in verse 29 of Matthew 24. And the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casts her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. We see the stars falling as a fig tree. Here we have in Matthew 24, he says, verse 31, and he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet. He shall send his angels. Here we have the stars fell unto the heaven as the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casts her untimely figs. Stars are a reference to angels. When the angels come in the millions coming from the sky, it's going to look like stars falling. The stars and the angels are equated in the Bible. They are sometimes synonymous for each other, stars and angels. So he's saying, and the stars of heaven fell unto the earth. The stars of heaven, the angels of heaven shall, and in here it says here, and he shall send his angels with a sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather his elect. So when you say the stars are falling, this is the angels coming down, and they're going to look like stars falling out of heaven, coming to gather the elect from one end of heaven to the other. And he talks about here in verse 32, and now learn the parable of the fig tree. He brings up the fig tree. Now guess what is mentioned here? The fig tree. Verse 13, and the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree. There it is. When you do a comparison study, it's practically reading, you got one sign after another sign all matching. They match each other. And he goes on to says, look at the sign of the fig tree, the parable of the fig tree, and he mentions the fig tree. And he says, now he's talking about the kings of verse 15 of chapter 6. He's talking about the kings and the nations of the earth all hiding in the dens and the rocks. Well, guess over here, it says over here in verse 30 of Matthew 24, and then shall appear the Son of Man, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with great power and glory. So here it is, there it is. There's the tribes, the great men, everybody hiding themselves. They're all fearful. They're mourning. They're definitely mourning. So there's another sign that matches Revelation 6 to Matthew 24. Also, I want to go over here quickly to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, starting at verse 13. He's talking about the rapture of the church. Now, he says here, he's talking about the rapture of the church. It starts at, read it for yourself, 1 Thessalonians 4, 13 through 18. But I want to go down to verse 16. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, and with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. And then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together, raptured, with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. So shall we ever be with the Lord. Okay, now what I really wanted to point out here was that we shall be caught up together with them in the clouds. And you see here in Matthew 24, they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds. Okay, so there is no doubt here that Matthew 24 is talking about the rapture. Coming in the clouds. And we are going to go up in the clouds to meet him in the air. Okay, and like I said, you can just continue on. You know that he's talking about the rapture. He's talking about the days of Noah. For as in the days that, this is verse 38, for as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage until the day of Noah entered the ark. So he's talking about, and like I said, and he goes on and talks about how two will be in a field and one will be taken, one will be left, two will be in bed, one will be taken, one will be left. These are times when people are not going to be, they're unaware that disaster is imminent. They're unaware that disaster is imminent. And so therefore, this is not the end of the tribulation, the great tribulation. This is the end of those tribulations, the 2,000 years of tribulation that we have been going through and they're still in. But the end of those immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened. And here we have in Revelation chapter 6, the sixth seal being opened and the sun becoming black. Like I said, all the signs match up here in Revelation chapter 6 to the signs in Matthew 24, starting at verse 29. That is the sign of his coming. This is the rapture of the church, and the rapture of the church therefore happens in Revelation chapter 6 at the sixth seal. There is no doubt about it. The signs match. The signs match. They matchy. Therefore, there can be no doubt whatsoever that the sixth seal is actually the sign or the end of the tribulation of those days or these days that we're in. And the end of those tribulation happens, and then there's the rapture of the church immediately after the tribulation of those days. Then comes the rapture of the church, and then comes the great tribulation of the wrath of God, which doesn't start till chapter 7 of Revelation, actually chapter 8 of Revelation. Let me just go to chapter 7 first of all, and show you that this indeed is where the sixth seal still has been opened. We haven't got to the seventh seal. The 144,000 are marked here on earth. These are Jewish men from the 12 tribes of Israel who are marked, sealed by God so that no one can hurt them. And their job, I believe, is to evangelize, as well as the two witnesses. The two witnesses, we know for a fact, as you read into the book of Revelation, they evangelize for 3.5 years. For 3.5 years, they are given the job of evangelism after the rapture of the church. But they are first sealed here during the sixth seal. That's when they are sealed, not until after the rapture. And they are Jewish men here on earth. And then you see here in Revelation chapter 7, there's a great multitude in heaven of all nations and kindreds and peoples and tongues before the throne and before the Lamb. They are before the throne of God and before Jesus Christ. And there's a question that's posed to John, who are they and where did they come from? And he said, Sir, thou knowest. And he said, These are they which came out of great tribulation, have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore they're before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple, and he that sitteth on the throne shall dwell among them. And they shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more, neither shall the sun light upon them, nor any heat. For the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall feed them, and shall lead them into living fountains of water, and God shall wipe away every tear from their eyes. So we know that this is the church. We know this is the church because they know Christ. They know Christ. And these are they who have been removed at this sign of his coming at Matthew 24, immediately after the tribulation of those days, or these days. And we have not yet seen this sign of the sun being darkened and the moon turning to blood. We haven't yet seen it. We've seen blood moons, but not this particular sign, because all these other things have not happened yet. Okay? And I just want to go on and a little bit further here in Revelation chapter 8, just to show you that when he had opened the seventh seal, so we don't see the seventh seal opened until Revelation chapter 8, and there was silence in heaven for about the space of a half an hour. And then after the half an hour, then all these trumpet judgments start happening. And the Antichrist, of course, is not yet revealed until after the rapture of the church. So those people can speculate all they want about who the Antichrist is. He has not yet been revealed to anybody, as far as I'm concerned. So anyway, read all of chapter 24, and you will see very clearly, and particularly beginning at verse 27, 28, and you will see, and then do a comparison study to Revelation chapter 6. You will see the sixth seal. You will see that that is what he's referring to. So with those people who are saying that all these signs will happen at the rapture or after the rapture or just before the rapture, they're wrong. They have been happening since the destruction of the temple. Okay, these signs have been growing exponentially since the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. Also, there's something else I wanted to say. What was it now? I wanted to go to the Song of Solomon. Oh, before I go back, just go back to Matthew 24 for just a second. I'm just thinking, you know what? The Lord might have been giving us a hint as to when immediately um, after those days, He might be giving us a sign as to when the the rapture of the church occurs, because He says in verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days, we see the sign of the Son of Man, and He comes to gather His elect from the four ends of the earth as a fig tree. And when his branch is yet tender and puts forth leaves, you know that the summer is nigh. So here is, he says the parable of the fig tree. So likewise, when ye see all these things, know that it is near, even at the door. This would indicate spring. This would indicate spring as far as I can see, because the fig leaves, the fig starts putting forth its fruit in the spring. Okay? That would be Passover, anywhere from Passover to Pentecost, I think. And also to think about it, we those who are in Christ will who participate in His death, burial, and resurrection, we shall be like Him. The Bible says we shall be like Him. We are like Him. If we are like Him, then perhaps we are also like Him in His resurrection, that we will be transformed on the day He was transformed. I'm just saying, I don't know, but it's possible, since particularly He said, learn the parable of the fig tree, that when it puts forth its leaves. He might be giving us a hint. Could be a hint. Also, look at Song of Solomon. I was looking at the Song of Solomon, and the bride has gone through many tribulations. She's gone. She was introduced to her bridegroom. She loves him, but she wasn't ready for him. And then she goes through lots of tribulations to prepare her to be the bride that he needs, and the bride she's looking for. So after she's gone through a lot of tribulating, she goes to the garden. She's resting pretty much. She goes to the garden, and this is chapter 6. And she's in the garden, and she's talking about. She went down to the garden, verse 11. I went down into the garden of nuts to see the fruits of the valley, to see whether the vine flourished and the pomegranates budded. So she's looking for the budding of pomegranates. Well, when does that happen in the time or the area of Israel? It happens in the late spring, between March and, I guess, well, late spring would be around the time of Passover. So she's going down to look for pomegranates that see if they budded. And then she continues, or ever I was aware, my soul made me like the chariots of Aminadab. Her soul becomes like a chariot. A chariot is a fast-moving vehicle. Or ever was I aware, my soul made me like the chariots of Aminadab. When she's in the garden looking for fruits, looking for the budding of the pomegranate, which happens in late spring, her soul becomes like a chariot. Interesting statement. And then she says, then comes the people, the choir chimes in and says in verse 13, return, return, O Shulamite, return, return, that we may look upon thee. So what the people, the chorus, is now saying, come back, because she's saying, my soul is like a chariot. She's taken away. She's raptured. She's removed. And the chorus says, come back, come back. They're in a panic. We want to see you. Come back. That we may look upon thee. Come back here. They're in a panic because she's disappeared like a chariot. What will you see in the Shulamite? As it were, the company of two armies. I thought, what does that mean? As it were, the company of two armies. Well, think about it. When the church leaves, what two armies are there? the angelic army and the saints. The angels are coming down to get the saints, and the two are leaving together. What would you see in the Shulamite? The company as of two armies, the saints and the angels. That's the rapture passage in the Song of Solomon. And again, it's probably a clue that this is something to refer to the late spring. He's looking for the pomegranate. See if the pomegranates have budded. That happens in late spring in Israel. So around the time of Passover, Pentecost, somewhere, it could be. Anyway, I just thought this would all be very interesting and fascinating to you. It was fascinating to me, and like I said, it's proof positive, 100%. If you look at it, you can't deny it, that the rapture happens at the sixth seal in the 6th chapter of Revelation, and it corresponds perfectly with Matthew 24 and also 1 Thessalonians 4:16 about the shout from heaven, the trumpets, and the clouds. Okay, that they all go together. Okay, Matthew 24, 1 Thessalonians 4, and Revelation 6 and the 6th seal. Okay, look for it yourself. God bless, and I'll talk to you later.